Is it possible to design, construct and operate a building that puts a focus on minimizing its environmental impact while maximizing the social and economic benefits? Well, the good news is that the answer is yes. By making smart choices, such as selecting low-impact materials, implementing energy-efficient systems, reducing or even eliminating waste, and creating healthy indoor environments. In fact, when you remember that the built environment generates around 40% of global carbon emissions, the real question is, why aren't all buildings built that way? In this episode, we take a closer look at what is possible on a visit to Hyllie Terrass in Malmö, one of the most sustainable office buildings in Sweden. Åsa Johansson, a project developer with Skanska, shows me around Hyllie Terrass. Wow, now we're out on one of the terraces. I see why you like this.
Yes.
It's a visually striking building, with terraces on each floor creating a staircase effect around a central garden. I'm not very good at plants and so on, but there's a lot of greenery here. I mean, it's like walking out into a park and stuff. And we're on the 5th floor here.
Exactly, and you have terraces all the way up to the 12th floor. The plantation here, it's filled with biochar. And biochar is a product that's actually a carbon sink. It can keep carbon from getting into the air, and it supplies the greenery with nutrition, and it also filters water.
Every detail has been thought through to minimize climate impact and make it a great place to work. One of the biggest testimony to the work that you've done is walking around the building itself. It's such an amazing place to be. The atrium, and we're going to go for a bit of a walk through the atrium, but the offices, the views, everything. What's it like working here?
To me, it's just wonderful. I'm happy every day I come to work, really. A day like this, when the sun is shining, to be able to walk straight out from your office floor and having the greenery of the terraces and, as you said, the view, and just seeing Hyllie and all its new developed residential buildings and parks, and you have the bridge to Denmark and the blue skies. It brings you such joy to go back to work after that.
Even the furniture in the lobby was made out of what would normally be considered construction waste.
What we're seeing here are really waste. So everything you look at is waste material that really should have been thrown away. So we can just stop here and have a look at this reception desk, for example. What you see are end cuttings from joists. And these joists has been used during the construction phase here at the project. So this is material that should have just been thrown away, that we decided to save. And to me, this is a very beautiful installation. Instead of just having a traditional reception desk, instead it becomes almost like an interesting artwork or something.
Yeah, it is. It's painted black, I guess, but you can even see the grain in the timber there. It's a really nice, as you say, it's an installation. Much nicer than just sort of plain black veneer that you usually see.
Exactly.
I understand that part of the mindset behind this was about identifying the biggest contributors to climate impact and then seeing how you could reduce them. How did that work? How did you do that?
We started with the really stupid questions, if you will. Why do we do this? Do we really need to build in this way? Can we do something different? Can we use different materials? And so on and so on. So when we found the large contributors, of course, we knew the concrete was one of them, and steel as well. So we focused on the big ones, of course. And we didn't really have the answers. So we invited the suppliers to the table, and we were very transparent with them and said, we don't know how to do this. We only know that we need to lower our carbon footprint, and we need you to join us on that journey. So how do we do this in the best way?
One of our biggest challenges at Skanska is with our net zero target is scope 3. It's the value chain. It's trying to find all our suppliers and all that sort of stuff. So seems like you've found the code. It's working with our partners and our suppliers and getting them to provide the materials that help us reduce our carbon emissions. Does that feel right?
Yes, I would say. And for us, it's been important not to try and tell them what to do, because we want the answers coming from them. We want them to see that there's a business model that works for them. This is a commercial product that's going to work, not just in our product, but in coming projects as well. So we want our partners to see that this is the future and that they are able to develop a product that they believe in.
That's fantastic. That's the way we've got to do this.
Yes, I think so too.
I understand that this even had an effect on, I mean, you're saying that this is helping the partners develop their own business models and so on. I've heard that this has even had an effect on the local market, and you're saying that there's a lot of other development going on in the area. Have you seen sort of the follow-on effects from this?
Yes, just look at our neighbor here. The neighboring project, they also have this certification of net zero certification, as we call it, from Sweden Green Building Council. We started as a pilot, and our next door neighbor also decided to take the step and try this certification. And our clients, our tenants are asking for it now. So it really has a ripple effect, I would say.
You described it as the net zero certification with the Swedish Green Building Council. But you've also got LEED Platinum and WELL certifications here. How do you think around certifications, and how important are they for the tenants and the people who are going to move in here?
I would say they are very important because it's a third-party certificate that you're doing something that you can compare it with others. It's not your way of describing. It's a third party that sets the limit and sets the framework for how should we work with sustainability or with health, for example, when it comes to WELL. And I think it's interesting that you're mentioning WELL, because it's one of those certifications that speaks to the human beings, for the people who are going to work here in the building. And I mean, you can talk about different materials or a carbon footprint, but when you talk about health and well-being, that's when you talk to the actual person, because it's their everyday life. They are going to be working in this building, or are working. We have almost a full building now, so they are working in this building. And seeing things that we have done to improve the health and well-being.
You've also got smart solutions working in the building. So, I mean, not just during the construction phase, but even during the operations phase, how you're reducing the carbon emissions. Can you talk us through some of those solutions that you're using here?
One example is the partnership we have with our energy supplier. For example, this is the first project I'm working with, at least, that we have PV panels on the roof, and we also have a battery storage in the basement. So it's a way of trying to be more self-sufficient, even though it's not supporting the whole building, but it's a first step for us to try and cut the peaks in the morning when everyone arrives. You plug in your car and you put on your coffee machine on your computers and everything. Then we have a storage in the basement to help that peak.
Very smart, and we're seeing more and more photovoltaic systems coming in, and I'm seeing quite a few all around Hyllie. So yes. It's great to see these sort of trends happening across the market. I understand that when it was being built, and this is more a construction question, but there was a carbon budget that we said, okay, we've got this amount of carbon, and we can't exceed that. How does that work when you're developing something like this?
Well, yeah, that's right. We got that limit from the Sweden Green Building Council due to the certification. And that was a great thing to have, because it means it's a maximum level. You can't exceed it, so you have to stay under it. And that means after you work with our large contributors, as we were talking about, the concrete and the steel and so on, you keep on doing the work. It becomes a natural process in your daily work. So even though you have the large ones, you keep looking, even if it's about textile carpets or handles for the doors. It's the same process, and that's where you find the extra savings. And you might think that a textile carpet isn't that bad. But when you look at the total area in the building, the floor area in the building, it sums up to quite a few kilograms of CO2 emissions. So it's equally important, I think, to even look at the small contributors as well, not just focus on the large ones, but making it part of your working process.
I guess it's the same as in a financial budget. You can do the big ticket numbers, but then you want to say, okay, can we save some here? Can we save some there? I want to ask, you've mentioned the door handles. How did you save carbon in door handles?
Just by asking questions, to ask our suppliers, what's your best product? What can you offer us? And that's basically what we've done throughout the projects, and found great suppliers that we normally haven't worked with earlier. So, and in the beginning, we had to find them. But after a while, they hear about us, and they have contacted us and asked, look at this, look at what we have. So we found a lot of new materials and products as well.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today and for being on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure to have you.
It was really nice to have you here.
Hyllie Terrass really is a great example of what the office buildings of the future will probably look like. The path to sustainability, however, is not without challenges. High initial costs associated with adopting sustainable practices can deter potential investors, despite the promise of long-term savings. And the absence of standardized regulations across different regions adds another layer of complexity, leading to inconsistent implementation of sustainable practices. So, what are the major trends in sustainable project development construction space over the past year? As we look back over our first 2 seasons, we wanted to bring back a favourite guest, Lena Hök, to the podcast. There's no one better to look at the trends that are happening around the world right now. Lena's Skanska's Executive Vice President for Sustainability and Innovation, and she was in our very first episode and also featured in our special report from New York Climate Week. Lena, welcome back to Shaping Sustainable Places.
Hi, great to be here.
To start with, can we look at what have been the major shifts that you've seen happening in the sustainable project development and construction space over the past year?
Well, if looking at the more, so to say, mega trends, there I see 2 twin trends that are really impacting our industry. And those are decarbonization as well as digitization. And when it comes to decarbonization, it means for us, it is a technological shift taking place right now when it comes to how to reduce carbon emissions from foremost materials as well as energy needed both to construct a building or infrastructure as well as the energy needed to operate the building long term. So the decarbonization by that pushes for new solutions and innovations in how to decarbonize materials, for example, circular solutions or low carbon concrete or design for further efficiency. And that also ticks into the second trend then, the digitalization, actually meaning for us we can better monitor and steer whatever we build today. The energy and the water efficiency, we can optimize for the usage of a building, for example. But we can also follow up the performance and gain data of the performance. And that's increasingly important for key stakeholders, such as investor or tenants and customers. So that actually brings us back to the design, using the design tools, digital tools on how to design the most efficient and resource-efficient buildings or infrastructures.
2 very clear trends there, decarbonisation and digitalisation. We've also seen that a lot of governments, both national and regional governments, are introducing tougher frameworks and requirements when it comes to the built environment. Are there some overall trends we can highlight here? What are governments prioritising?
Yeah, there are several things. Differs a little bit depending on market and depending on what you are building. So I would say that energy efficiency, when it comes to whatever building we are building, that's really in top focus, especially in Europe, are pushing very much on energy efficiency of existing building and really tough demands on also new buildings, including also, I would say, major cities in US, we see an equal push and interest there. Also, how to raise the energy efficiency of the built environment. Secondly, there's also a push in Europe when it comes to refurbishment of existing buildings. So reuse materials or reuse foundations and structures to push for having a second thought if you really need to do a new building or if you can reuse and refurbish an existing building. And then finally, also to mention the infrastructure projects that is very much governments or cities or municipalities funding those. That's also a push for decarbonization. And there I can see it going from fossil-free construction sites using electrical equipment and heavy machinery, or for that part also decarbonization when it comes to using more materials that are more carbon efficient, so low carbon concrete, for example. So that's something that we do see pop up.
Now, these shifts are placing new and stricter demands on the customers that we work with as well at Skanska, whether they're investors or tenants, home buyers, or even governments, as you said, governments and municipal authorities when it comes to the infrastructure. How is Skanska helping customers address these demands and meet their own sustainability targets?
So we can do this in many kinds of ways, but the most impactful way for us to contribute to our customers, that is if we are part very, very early on. So early constructor involvement is really important. That's key, because that's when we can help out with, once you're doing the groundwork, setting the design, that's actually where you can design for efficiency on how you are planning the project, what materials you are using, or for that part, what kind of energy efficiency, or even if you can drive towards an energy plus building, a building that is producing its own energy, as well as potentially possibilities to store energy in order to make it an energy positive building.
This might be a good opportunity to bring up the fact I was at Hyllie Terrass in the Swedish city of Malmö a little earlier, which is something of a flagship when it comes to Skanska's sustainable commercial buildings. What are your thoughts about that particular project?
Oh, I love Hyllie Terrass, and I'm really impressed with the team working on Hyllie Terrass. And also I do know that they kind of set the common goal on how to make it the most sustainable building, and also taking on and using expertise from all through Skanska and also together with partners to really challenge themselves in the solutions that they applied on Hyllie. And we did think that would be much more costly, but in the end, I do know that it's just marginally more cost by actually applying all those solutions, because it was a very, very well-planned project. And maybe particularly of interest in Hyllie is also that we are trying out a solution when it comes to energy storage with battery. And that's amongst our innovation portfolio. That's amongst our one of the key themes when it comes to energy. How can a building produce energy, but also how can it store energy in order to be more an active or dynamic part of the energy ecosystem in the urban city?
Energy storage, a real enabler for renewable energy. Let's look at what you think are going to be the biggest trends coming up over the year ahead, or even longer ahead if you want.
So already mentioned energy. Energy is a mega trend. It's just going to keep up when it comes to the potential of having buildings being able to produce energy, being energy plus or energy positive buildings and storage energy. We're only in the beginning there. But a second one, I would say, is the need for infrastructure. So it's a major one. It's driven by the decarbonization trend, the digitization trend, as well as the deglobalization trend. And I noticed that BlackRock was doing one of the biggest investments ever, going very much into the infrastructure, funding of infrastructure. And that's something we've seen from several other heavy investors soaring investments into infrastructure. So that means the need for building facilities when it comes to fossil-free energy, so solar and wind, etc. That means also a lot of construction projects when it comes to infrastructure. We also see the deglobalization when it comes to lessen your vulnerability within your own supply chain, meaning that there will be needed for more different locations having your sourcing a bit closer to home markets. So also that is driving a need for infrastructure. And finally, and maybe to state also, unfortunately, there is a need for us today to rebuild and to secure existing infrastructure due to the need to be resilient to extreme weather events. Foremost, we think a lot of course, flooding. That is obvious, but you also have storms and you have heat. And especially in large cities, that's unfortunately a silent killer, having heat waves, and how for making the infrastructure and the urban environment to lessen those heat waves or floodings. That is also really important, where you both have technical solutions as well as nature-based solutions. All of this making up a great focus on investments in infrastructure.
Lena, thank you so much for being here and for taking the time.
Thank you so much for a really good dialogue.
It was great to hear Lena identify two key trends as ones to watch: decarbonization and digitalization. We've talked a lot about decarbonization on the podcast, with reports on ways to reduce the carbon in building materials such as concrete and asphalt, and to reduce the emissions from constructing and operating buildings, including using smart systems to monitor and improve energy efficiency, and using fossil-free equipment during the construction phase. Special thanks today to our guests Åsa Johansson and Lena Hök for joining us today, and thank you to all of you for listening to our second successful season. If you enjoyed this episode and this season, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out when we come back. If you have any thoughts about the show or about ideas for new episodes to come, don't hesitate to reach out to podcast@skanska.com. We'd love to hear from you. This is a podcast from Skanska, a leading property development and construction group. To find out more about how we and others are creating healthy, resilient communities and spaces, visit us at foresight.skanska.com. I'm John Ambrose. Thank you for joining us as we explore shaping sustainable places.